You have awakened to the truth. But why does the soul still grow weary? Perhaps no one prepared you for this moment, for the silence that follows the answer, for the weight that settles in just when everything should make sense. You traversed layers of pain, faced shadows, shattered illusions. You realized that much of what you called love was neediness, that what you called strength was disguised fear, that the search for spiritual truth was not an ascent, but a descent inward, into the darkness, into the depths of yourself. Rumi wrote, "Don't worry, everything you lose returns to you in another form." But nobody said what happens when what returns is the weariness from the search itself. This video is for you who woke up, but still feel an inexplicable weight. For you who feel you no longer fit in the old world, but also haven't yet found a new one to inhabit. For you who feel nameless weariness, emptiness with an echo, faith with cracks, and perhaps, just perhaps, what you're feeling isn't a setback. Perhaps the weariness of your soul is a sign that you're closer to healing than you imagine. Because yes, the spiritual awakening, it's beautiful, but it's also brutal. You don't hear about this in books. You don't hear about it in the pretty phrases that circulate on social media, because it doesn't sell, it doesn't please, it doesn't go viral. But here, we talk about real pain. Here, the truth doesn't come in sweet pills. It comes in breaths of lucidity. You're tired, because now you feel everything. What once went unnoticed, the falseness of a word, the absence of reciprocity, the noise of living on autopilot, now wounds you like invisible needles. You feel more than you'd like, and that's exhausting. The soul grows weary when it can no longer pretend. It's tiring to carry around memories that haven't faded, tired of trying to explain the inexplicable. It's exhausting, trying to save the whole world when you can barely breathe. And this type of tiredness cannot be cured by sleep. It can't be solved with distraction. This weariness is the silent cry of a soul that has awakened and seen everything as it truly is. Do you feel that way too? A weary soul is like fertile land after it has been burned. It looks destroyed, but it's silently regenerating. But for that, she needs something that almost no one knows how to give: time. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." But what if you're running from the light because it blinds you? What if your tiredness is just resistance? Resistance to accepting that the truth that set you free also broke you. You are in that liminal space between the old and the new, between a life that no longer serves its purpose and one that hasn't even begun yet. It is during this interval that the soul becomes worn down, because it is still trying to carry the old weight with the new consciousness. And now that you're awake, you can no longer sleep peacefully. That's why you're here. That's why you've come across this video. Perhaps your soul has guided you here because she's tired of screaming inside and needs a space to be heard. I want you to stay, because this video is more than an explanation. It's a mirror. Here we'll delve together into the hidden reason for this tiredness. We're going to reveal what nobody told you about spiritual awakening, and perhaps you'll discover that you're not alone. You are about to realize something that could change everything. But before we continue, answer me in the comments. Do you also feel this indescribable tiredness? Have you ever woken up and still felt lost? Write it down here, not to be seen, but to see oneself, because your pain has a name. Your soul has a story, and in this video, she will be heard. Send this video is speaking to you all the way here. It's because your soul recognized something between the lines, perhaps a truth you hadn't yet named, perhaps a pain that no one had validated. And if that made sense to you, don't forget to leave a like. It may seem like a simple gesture, but it shows that this type of content needs to exist, that more people need to hear this. And that spiritual pain also deserves space, also deserves to be understood, without judgment, without haste, without formulas. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey. Here, each video is a mirror, a safe place for weary souls that are awakening. And even if you think you're alone, you're not. There's a collective silence that's ready to be healed. And it all begins now. Perhaps you believed that awakening would be the end of the pain, that upon waking to the truth there would finally be peace, relief, a kind of reunion with something pure, serene, definitive. But what few dare to say, and what almost no one teaches, is that true awakening brings not only light, it also reveals the darkness. It throws open the abyss. And it is there, in that raw space, between the illusion you left behind and the reality that still frightens you, that a new pain is born. A silent, subtle pain which many confuse with relapse when, in fact, it is only the soul being forced to see everything as it really is, and not as it wanted it to be. What hurts isn't the awakening itself, but what it takes away from you. It rips away certainties, masks, fantasies. It shows you that some people never truly loved you, that many paths you insisted on following were distancing you from yourself, that the world you thought you understood was, in fact, always a projection of your own fears and desires. The pain after awakening doesn't come from what happens outside, but from what stirs within. It's the pain of seeing with naked eyes that love sometimes hurts, that silence sometimes screams, that spirituality, when real, isn't an escape, it's a confrontation. You begin to realize that emptiness isn't absence, it's excess. Excess of expectations, of attempts, of external voices that always told you who you should be. And now that you've removed all that, what remains is the echo of your own truth, resonating in a space that is still learning to be inhabited. And this echo is tiring, because it demands listening. And listening to yourself without distraction is one of the most challenging tasks the soul can face. Spiritual awakening, contrary to what is romanticized, is not a portal to paradise. It is a journey through the desert of the soul. It is a path of necessary losses. You lose the desire to please. You lose the impulse to hide. You lose the need to be accepted by everyone. But along with that, you also lose many things that still hurt to lose. You lose relationships that harmed you, yes, but that were a refuge. You lose habits that sabotaged you, but that gave you a sense of control. You lose ideas that limited you, but that gave you direction. Awakening in many aspects is a symbolic death, and every death, even a spiritual one, brings mourning. Mourning for who you were, mourning for everything you will no longer be. And no one prepares you for this grief. No one talks about how lonely this process can be, because while the world keeps turning, you are silent, gathering pieces of yourself that were left behind. There is no celebration along the way. There are no applause. There are no guarantees. There is only weariness. An existential weariness that has no name, but has weight, that has no form but occupies every part of your body. It is the weariness of being conscious in a sleeping world, the weariness of seeing depth where others only see the surface, the weariness of feeling everything, of carrying questions that no one answers, of longing for a peace that cannot be found anywhere, because it is still being born within you. And even when you try to explain yourself, it seems like nobody understands. How do you say you're tired of your own awareness? How do you verbalize that the pain you feel doesn't come from outside, but from an excess of lucidity? How do you explain that, since waking up, everything has become clearer, and at the same time heavier? It's not easy, but it's real. And that's the price of waking up. You begin to realize that there's no going back to the sleep of ignorance, that pretending doesn't hurt any less, that reversing the awakening isn't an option, because now you see, now you feel, now you know. And perhaps, just perhaps, this knowledge is merely testing you. Perhaps this weariness is a kind of filter, a sieve that separates those who want to appear conscious from those who are truly willing to live with their hearts exposed. Because awakening is this, an invitation to the nakedness of the soul, and that demands courage. It demands presence. It demands continuing, even when everything inside you begs you to stop. Because the truth once seen cannot be unseen, and you have already seen too much to pretend you haven't. This is where many give up. This is where most run back to distractions, empty relationships, automatic routines, because it hurts less, because it seems easier. But not you. You are here, listening until now, feeling every word. And that says a lot about your soul. It says that despite the weariness, it is still alive, still searching, still pulsating. And if you've made it this far, I want to ask you something, not as an empty ritual, but as a genuine act. If this video is speaking to parts of you that no one else understands, write in the comments, "I felt it." Write it like this, 3 words, but they carry a whole world. Because sometimes, all the soul needs is to know it's not alone. You're not tired of the world. You're tired of carrying a soul that feels everything all the time. Tired of being awake in a place that insists on continuing to sleep. tired of trying to adjust to a reality that no longer represents you. What exhausts you is not the external, but the internal density of someone who feels deeply, who observes beyond appearances, who perceives nuances that most ignore. And that has a price, a high, silent, invisible price. And it's this price that almost no one understands. Because spiritual exhaustion is not about laziness, discouragement, or lack of motivation. It is born from the intensity with which your soul breathes the world. There's a deep root behind this weariness, and it's not in the things you do, but in the layers you feel. You walk through the world with the pores of your soul open, absorbing pain, noise, absences, vibrations. Even when you try to protect yourself, your emotional field has expanded, and with it came a sensitivity that has become difficult to contain. Sometimes you enter a room and feel the weight that no one speaks of. You perceive the loneliness behind the smiles, the tension hidden in soft words, the sadness disguised as strength. You see, you pick up on it, you feel it, and this exhausts you, even without apparent reason. It's like always being on guard, as if your heart is never allowed to rest. And this constant feeling of absorbing the world around you creates an invisible overload. It's as if each encounter, each conversation, each silence leaves marks that accumulate, marks that don't fade with a good night's sleep, nor with a day of rest. Because what weighs you down isn't your body, it's your soul. And a weary soul doesn't recover with short breaks. It needs another language. It needs to be listened to, welcomed, understood in the depth of what it carries. Rumi said, "The weariness of the soul is a reminder that you are still far from home." And perhaps this phrase is one of the most uncomfortable truths you've ever heard, because it reveals that this unease that accompanies you is not a mistake. It's a sign, a calling, a message from your essence saying that there is still a path to be traveled, that there are still parts of you that live in exile, that there is still a separation between who you are and who you live. And that hurts. It hurts because it's real. It hurts because it touches that forgotten spot where the purest desires, the oldest wounds, and the dreams you silenced reside. This weariness of the soul is often the pain of not feeling like you belong, the feeling of being in the right place but on the wrong vibration, of being around people but feeling that no conversation truly connects with you, of being part of a social circle but remaining emotionally isolated. It's the weariness of smiling when you want to be silent, of giving when you want to receive, of being strong when all you want to do is collapse. And this isn't drama. It's not victimhood. It's the spiritual reality of someone who lives awake in a world that prefers sleep. You've tried to adapt, you've tried to ignore it, you've tried to stay silent. But the awakened soul no longer accepts molds. It rejects superficiality. It screams silently every time you try to diminish yourself to fit into structures that are too small. And this constant struggle between what you feel and what the world expects of you is one of the greatest sources of this unseen weariness. Often it comes disguised. It comes as an inexplicable apathy, a lack of meaning, a sadness that appears for no reason. But at the root, there's always this disconnect, the distance between who you are in essence and what you experience in practice. It's like trying to listen to loud music on broken headphones. Nothing flows. Nothing vibrates the right way. And even without understanding why, you feel like you're being drained from the inside. Some call it an existential crisis. Others call it spiritual depression. I prefer to call it longing. Longing for your inner home. Longing for the sacred place within you where everything makes sense. Where there are no demands, no expectations, no masks. Only truth, only presence, only healing silence. And perhaps this is the greatest invitation your soul is making to you right now, to return to that place, not as an escape, but as a reconnection. Because the truth is that no meditation, no technique, no course will cure you of this weariness if you continue to run away from yourself. The only remedy for a soul that feels too much is the radical acceptance of one's own sensitivity. It is honoring this capacity to feel as a gift, not as a burden. It is recognizing that weariness is not weakness. It is a warning that something needs to be realigned, that your soul is asking you for honesty, authenticity, space. And if you ignore this request, the weight only increases, until the day the body screams what the soul has tried to whisper for so long. Therefore, don't underestimate this weariness. It is sacred. It is a portal. It is truth. And perhaps, just perhaps, it is the beginning of a new path. A path where you no longer need to pretend that everything is all right, where you no longer need to carry everything you feel alone, where finally you can exist as you are, and not as others expect you to be. If this touched you in any way, if you felt that, somewhere inside you, these words echoed something you couldn't name. Write it here, in the comments. I carry a soul that feels too much. Write if this is true for you. Write if your soul is tired of pretending it doesn't feel. Write because sometimes just seeing that we are not alone already begins a new cycle. Nobody told you that awakening is just the beginning, that there's no finish line on the soul's journey, that there's no day when everything finally stops hurting, weighing you down, bothering you. Perhaps because the idea of total healing is a fantasy created to provide momentary relief. Perhaps because people still believe that spirituality is about escaping pain, when in reality it's about going through it consciously. You haven't failed because you still feel pain. You're not late because you're still tired. Your soul is in process, and real processes don't follow a linear script. The truth is that spiritual awakening tears. It tears away everything that is false. It tears away the ego. It tears away the lies you told yourself to survive. And tearing is tiring. There's a very common misconception out there that the spiritual path will lead you to a state of permanent peace, where no shadow visits you anymore, where everything flows smoothly, where you never feel lost again. But it's not like that. The soul isn't a switch that turns everything on and solves everything. The soul is a field in constant motion, a sea that sometimes calms, sometimes rages, a fire that warms and burns, a temple where the sacred and the wounded coexist. And for that reason it demands continuous presence, care, listening. Awakening is the invitation, healing is the journey, and this journey sometimes drags you along. It's easy to get lost in the idea that you should already be better, that you've already spent too much time feeling this pain, that you've already studied, read, and understood everything rationally. But the soul doesn't work with logic. It moves through layers, through cycles, through silences. And sometimes what seems like a relapse is just a return to a point you haven't fully healed. Because healing isn't forgetting. Healing is remembering without tearing yourself apart. It's looking again at the same wound, but with a new perspective, more loving, more present, more genuine. But there's a part of you that still seeks healing as an ultimate destination, that still believes that, by healing this pain, everything will finally fall into place, that life will stop hurting, that feelings will stop fluctuating, that people will understand you, that the past will fade away. And this part suffers, because it gets frustrated every time it realizes that peace still eludes it, that weariness still returns, that emptiness still whispers. This part suffers, because it was taught to believe in total healing as something definitive. But Rumi said, don't settle for stories of how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend. And awakening your own legend is accepting that your healing has its own rhythm, its own tone, its own dance. Sometimes light, sometimes intense, but always true. The soul grows weary because it is shedding layers of lies. The lies you inherited, the ones you were told, and especially the ones you repeated yourself to survive. I'm fine. I've moved on. It doesn't affect me anymore. How many times have you said this without truly feeling it? How many times have you forced yourself to be okay just to maintain an image of strength? How many times have you ignored the cry of your soul so as not to appear fragile, needy, lost? These internal lies, however small they may seem, accumulate weight, and the weariness comes precisely from trying to keep these facades standing while your soul only wants to rest in authenticity. There is an exhaustion that stems from living in dissonance with one's own truth. It's the weariness of smiling when everything inside is crumbling, of saying yes when the whole body wants to say no, of trying to appear balanced while the soul is in chaos. This type of exhaustion is spiritual, and no one notices it from the outside because it doesn't bleed, but it consumes, slowly, and you feel it, in the thoughts that won't stop, in the heightened sensitivity, in the desire to disappear not out of drama but out of exhaustion from the performance. Because yes, living pretending to be healed is a performance, and it makes you sick. But here's a truth you might need to hear right now. There's nothing wrong with still feeling pain. There's no shame in still being tired. There's no flaw in not having moved on yet. The soul is not a machine. It's fertile ground, and all ground needs to be plowed, watered, respected. There are roots that are loosening now. There are inner lies that are only now being seen. There are wounds that are only now ready to show themselves. And this doesn't mean regression. It means maturity. It means readiness. It means your soul trusts you enough to show itself as it is, without filters, without masks, without hiding places. And the more you accept this truth, that healing isn't a straight line, that waking up hurts, that tiredness is part of the journey, the lighter everything becomes, not because the pain disappears, but because you stop fighting it, you stop pretending, and this silent relief, this pause from the demand to always be okay, is already a form of healing. It's already rest. It's already love. If you've read this far, and felt that these words touched places within you that no one else sees, write in the comments. I also got tired of pretending I was cured. Write if this sentence makes sense to you. Write not for me, but for yourself. Because perhaps by acknowledging this publicly, you will release something inside you that has been trapped for too long. Perhaps you're exhausted because you feel everything, even what others hide, and no one sees it. No one realizes how tiring it is to be this kind of soul. You arrive somewhere and the atmosphere already speaks to you, even when no one opens their mouth. You notice the pauses in the middle of sentences, the silence between words, the eyes that look away, the smile that isn't sincere. You perceive what isn't said. You feel what's kept hidden. You carry the weight of emotions that aren't even yours, but they pass through you as if they were. And all this happens in seconds, without filter, without warning, without rest. It's as if your soul is always wide open, without shielding, without protection. And no matter how much you try to shield yourself, something within you remains open, because your sensitivity isn't something you chose to have. It's part of your nature. It's in your body, in your gaze, in the way you listen, in the intensity with which you surrender. But the world wasn't made for those who feel this way. It's fast, shallow, immediate. And you are deep, deeply affected, deeply aware, deeply present. And that's why, so often, deeply tired. People look at you and think you're strong, intense, mysterious, but they have no idea how hard it is to live like this, how much it costs to carry a soul that reads everything, feels everything, absorbs everything. Sometimes you withdraw without knowing why. Sometimes you say no when everyone expected you to say yes. Sometimes you remain silent because you feel that any word would be too violent. Not because you're complicated, but because you're too empathetic. You perceive nuances that hurt you. You feel vibrations that drain you. And this accumulates even when you try to pretend everything is all right. This kind of sensitivity, when not understood, becomes a prison. You start to doubt yourself, to wonder if you're exaggerating, if you're being too fragile, too dramatic, too intense. Because nobody seems to feel like you feel. Nobody seems to be affected as much as you. But the truth is that this gift, because yes, it's still a gift, comes with a price. And the price is this invisible exhaustion. This feeling that the world is always on top of you. That the pain of others clings to your skin. That the conflicts of others lodge in your chest. That even the silence of others, when charged with tension, poisons you. To feel deeply is to walk naked among thorns. There is no protection. There is no armor. Only the raw flesh of your soul, in direct contact with the most brutal aspects of people. You touch the shadows of others unintentionally, and often this makes you distance yourself, close yourself off, hide yourself. Not because you don't love, but because loving too much also hurts. Because you don't know how to love halfway. You don't know how to live superficially. You don't know how to pretend everything is all right when you feel it isn't. And the problem is that the world asks exactly that of you all the time. Disguise, distraction, detachment, but you don't know how to switch off. And that, though it seems like a curse, is your most sacred truth. Because only those who feel deeply are capable of truly loving, of caring without asking for anything in return, of listening with their whole body, of being sincerely present. Only those who feel deeply are capable of healing. But before healing, they feel the cut. Before illuminating, they traverse the darkness. Before teaching, they bleed. And that is your journey. You feel what no one sees, but you also transform what no one dares to touch. Perhaps that's why you attracted so many people who needed healing. People who approached you seeking comfort, understanding, silence, presence, and you gave it. You always gave. Even when you were empty, even when you were broken, even when your soul asked for a break, and you offered more. Because those who feel too much also give too much. And when the world perceives this inexhaustible source within you, it drinks, but it rarely gives back. It rarely asks if there's still water in your well. It rarely cares for you as you care for everyone. And it is at this point that the exhaustion becomes unbearable. Because it's not just physical, it's spiritual, it's existential. It's as if your soul is screaming for care, but no one is listening. As if you were screaming in a language no one else speaks. And yet you continue, because that's your essence. You feel everything. You love everything. You suffer with everything. But you still believe. You still dream. You still go on. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters." And perhaps that's the explanation for everything you feel. Perhaps your feelings are the door through which the world begins to change. Because you don't just feel, you illuminate. Even when you're tired, even when no one recognizes it, even when everything inside you begs you to stop. And perhaps today is the moment for you to begin honoring that within yourself, to stop demanding so much of yourself for being different, to accept that this sensitivity is your greatest strength, even if at times it seems like your greatest burden, because it is within this sensitivity that your truest soul resides, the soul that feels, that lives, that vibrates, the soul that still believes, the soul that is tired, yes, but that hasn't stopped beating. If you've made it this far and felt that these words conveyed what you could never explain, write in the comments, "I feel what no one else sees." Write with truth. Write as liberation. Because sometimes simply naming what we feel is enough to begin healing. Because sometimes just acknowledging, "I feel," is enough to alleviate the burden of carrying everything alone. You think you should already be healed. You believe, perhaps without realizing it, that you've spent too much time feeling what you feel, that you should have already overcome that old pain, that emptiness that insists on returning, that wound that sometimes seems healed and suddenly starts bleeding again. But who told you that? Who convinced you that there's a deadline for the soul, that the heart has a clock, that spiritual awakening should be quick, clean, direct? You were raised by a world that is in a hurry. That pushes you out of yourself. That demands answers from you even before you formulate the questions. That judges you if you still feel pain after months, after years, as if chronological time had some control over your internal processes. But the soul is not a stopwatch. It is sacred ground. And everything that is sacred needs time. It needs space. It needs silence. The soul does not hurry. It moves in the time of love, in the time of surrender, in the time of listening. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters, but it only enters when you stop running." And that is a painful truth, because most of us, when faced with pain, run. We run to keep busy. We run to distract ourselves. We run to pretend we've already forgotten. We even run to heal. Yes, even the desire to heal can become an escape. It can become a new rush. And in this race, we lose the present. We lose the now. We lose the depth that is only revealed when the soul finds pause. Have you ever noticed how sometimes you try to rush even your emotions? As if having read so many books, done so much therapy, practiced so much meditation, you shouldn't already be feeling certain things. As if your consciousness no longer allows certain thoughts, certain reactions, certain voids. But consciousness is not a contract of perfection. It is an invitation to presence. And being present is also being vulnerable to what emerges, even when what emerges seems to contradict everything you already know. This is a point that confuses many people on the spiritual path. The illusion that self-knowledge eliminates pain, that wisdom prevents relapses, that clarity solves everything. But it's not like that. The soul is spiral. It returns, it revisits, it insists. And that's not failure. That's depth. Because each time you return to that pain, you see it with new eyes. You access a new layer. You understand something you couldn't see before. And that's progress, even if it seems like repetition. Inner haste stems from the spiritual ego, the ego that tells you you're already behind schedule, that you need to evolve faster, that you need to be an example of light, balance, and constant peace. But the soul isn't a project of enlightenment. It's a real life field, with real pain, with stories that need time to be digested, with memories that return, not to hinder you but to remind you where you came from and why you are here. When you try to rush healing, you are actually rejecting the process. You are trying to skip steps. You want results without intimacy with the path. But the soul does not surrender to force. It does not reveal its treasures to those who only want to arrive quickly. It only shows itself to those who are willing to remain, to those who endure discomfort, to those who have the courage to stay even when everything within you begs for escape, to stay even when nothing seems to make sense, to stay even when spiritual weariness covers you like a cloak. And there is beauty in this stillness, because it is in this space of pause that true transformation happens. It is when you stop chasing after healing that it begins to sprout naturally within you, because healing is not something you seek, it is something you allow. It happens when you take control out of your hands, when you surrender, when you accept that it still hurts and that's okay, that it still tires you, and that's okay, that something is still missing, and that's okay. This acceptance is not conformity. It is wisdom, the wisdom of the soul that understands that divine time does not follow human clocks. How many times have you felt guilty for being sad again? How many times have you criticized yourself for still thinking about that person? How many times have you judged yourself for not moving forward as you imagined you should? This is the trap of inner haste. It transforms your process into punishment. It makes you feel wrong for being human. But you are not here to perform spirituality. You are here to live, to feel, to journey. And journeying takes time. The soul's time is silent, circular, mysterious. Sometimes it seems like nothing is changing, but inside everything is reorganizing itself. Sometimes it seems like you've stopped, but in reality you're integrating something too profound to be perceived immediately. Sometimes emptiness is just the ground being cleared for something new to be born. But for that, you need to trust. And trust isn't built in haste. It's born in the silence of stillness, in the space where the soul breathes, where the heart aligns with what is. If these words resonated with a part of you that still insists on rushing, on wanting to solve everything quickly, write it here in the comments. I choose to honor the time of my soul. Write this down if it makes sense to you. Write it for yourself. Because consciously declaring this can be the first step to slowing down from within, and finally allowing healing to happen at the pace it truly needs to happen. What no one told you is that weariness of the soul is not a sign of weakness. It's not a deviation from the path. It's not spiritual defeat. Weariness of the soul is the sacred asking for a pause, a silence, a space, because even that which is divine needs to breathe. And you were taught to resist, to persist, to continue even when everything within you begs for a moment of rest. You learned that stopping is dangerous, that resting is regression, that allowing yourself to feel deeply is too dangerous. But this is a lie that keeps you away from your essence, a lie that distances you from true healing. The truth is that resting is also prayer, not just the physical rest that comes after a long day, but the deep rest of the soul, which comes when you allow yourself to simply exist, without resolving anything, without proving anything, without seeking anything, just being, just existing, just breathing with everything that is still wounded, with everything that still pulsates, with everything that hasn't yet organized itself. Because pain, when listened to with respect, begins to dissolve on its own. And there's a silent key to this. When you stop fighting what you feel begins to change. Perhaps no one has taught you that there is healing in doing nothing, that there is wisdom in stopping, that there is strength in surrendering. Because the world spins fast, demands haste, rewards those who pretend to be okay, those who appear strong, those who smile even when everything is crumbling inside. But the sacred within you moves at a different pace. It doesn't care about appearances. It is not impressed by forced effort. The sacred responds to truth. And the truth sometimes is that you need to stop. You need to stop running from yourself. Stop running from the pain. Stop believing that you will only be worthy when you are completely healed. Because the soul does not bow to this kind of demand. It only flourishes when it finds space to exist in peace. And peace, for the soul, is not the absence of pain. It is permission to feel it without judgment, to rest within one's own pain without the rush to transform it. Have you given yourself that space? Have you allowed your pain to simply be, without trying to interpret it, justify it, or remedy it? Have you sat beside it as you would sit beside a tired child, with compassion, tenderness, and acceptance? Because often that's what your soul is asking for. A lap to rest on, a break, a moment of silence amidst so much inner noise. Pain, when viewed with gentle eyes, reveals not only where we bleed, but where we are alive. It points to the most sensitive, most human, most tangible part of ourselves. And in that space between what hurts and what heals, there is something precious. Presence. Being present with your pain is one of the highest forms of spirituality, because it is in this state of presence that the soul begins to reorganize itself, without pressure, without demands, only with love. But you are taught to erase what hurts, to bury what bothers you, to mask what still throbs. So you keep trying to function, trying to stay strong, trying to keep going. But there comes a moment when that strength turns into rigidity, and what should be protection becomes a prison. Have you ever felt like that? Trapped within your own attempt to stay strong? This is where the key is revealed, because true rest for the soul isn't what you get when you're healed. It's what you allow yourself even when it still hurts, even when you're still confused, even when your heart is still heavy. It's the rest of someone who recognizes they no longer need to prove anything, that they're not in a race, that they don't need to conform to any image of enlightenment. Resting in pain is an act of courage. It's sitting beside your shadow and saying, I'm not going to push you away anymore. It's looking at tiredness with affection. It's listening to exhaustion with respect. It's saying to yourself, it's okay if I can't take it anymore today. It's okay if I need to stop. And perhaps it is at that exact moment, at that point of surrender, that the healing truly begins. Because it is there, where you stop pretending, that the sacred can enter. The soul doesn't heal through effort. It heals through surrender, through truth, through pauses where you can simply breathe, feel, and exist with all that you are. And this isn't regression. This is spiritual maturity. It's recognizing that your process is unique, that your pain has its own story, that your light also needs shadow to stay alive. So if your soul is tired today, listen. If you can no longer pretend you're okay, respect that. If your body is asking for silence today, offer it. You don't need to be ready all the time. You don't need to be strong all the time. You just need to be honest. And that honesty with yourself is a prayer the universe hears. If this message resonated with you, if you felt this is something your soul needed to hear a long time ago, write it in the comments below. Today, I allow my soul to rest. Write truthfully. Write for yourself. Because sometimes, simply declaring this space opens the door for the sacred to gently enter. And everything, absolutely everything, begins to transform in the soul's own time. The desert seems empty, arid, silent. But what few realize is that it holds within itself a profound wisdom, a raw spirituality, a kind of silence that is not absence, but rather presence in its rawest state. In the desert, everything superfluous disappears. Only the essential remains. And perhaps that is precisely why your soul is so weary. It is traversing its own inner desert, a journey that cannot be skipped or shortened, a journey where you need to empty yourself of everything that is not true, of everything that is not you, in order to discover or rediscover what is essential. Your soul is in this desert, and the weariness you feel, this profound exhaustion that cannot be resolved with physical rest, stems from the constant effort of searching outside for what can only be found within. You continue to seek external sources for an internal thirst. You still believe that there is something or someone who can finally complete what is missing, that an answer, a person, a cure, a specific moment will arrive to finally quench this void. But the spiritual desert cannot be crossed with other people's maps. It demands silence, it demands listening, it demands that you stop searching and begin to inhabit it. Perhaps what hurts now isn't the desert itself, but your resistance to accepting that you're in it. Because your soul expected that, upon awakening, it would immediately find flowery fields, crystal clear waters, constant light, and suddenly it found itself in a dry territory, with a sky that was too clear, with soil that was too hard, with days that were too long. And that's frustrating. That hurts, because you thought you had already walked far enough to deserve peace. But the soul doesn't follow a logic of deserving. It follows the truth. And the truth sometimes leads us exactly where we didn't want to go. But here's the secret. The desert is not punishment. The desert is a passage. It didn't come to punish you. It came to reveal you. Because it is there that external voices fall silent. It is there that the noises of the ego are left behind. It is there that you finally find yourself, not as a character, not as an image, but as essence. It is in the desert that you realize how much you depended on distractions to avoid feeling, how much you sought ready-made answers to avoid listening to your own intuition, how much you ran from one thing to another, from one relationship to another, from one phase to another, just to avoid the inevitable encounter with your most intimate thirst. This thirst is not a lack. It's not an emotional need. It's not a hunger for validation. It's a thirst for belonging, for reconnection with something sacred that you know exists, but that has been lost amidst so many expectations, promises, and frustrations. This thirst is spiritual, and there is no source outside of yourself capable of quenching it. There is no external voice, however loving, that can fill what only your silence can fill, because the water you seek is already there, inside, hidden beneath layers of fear, belief, and unprocessed pain. And the desert is the space that forces you to dig. And digging hurts, because you need to go through the stones you've placed upon yourself. You need to face the dust of the past. You need to traverse the ghosts of what you didn't live, what you swallowed, what you hid. But at the same time that it's difficult, it's liberating. Because each layer removed, each resistance released, each truth accepted, opens space for water to spring forth. And when it springs forth, it's not a small amount. It's a fountain. It's a source. It's sacredness flowing from within, not as momentary relief, but as a profound reconnection. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you prefer to crawl through life?" And perhaps this phrase has everything to do with your current desert experience, because crawling at its core means continuing to depend on external factors, continuing to wait for something to come and rescue you. But your wings don't grow in comfort. They form in the desert. It is there that you begin to feel the weight of your own greatness. It is there that you discover that flying is not escaping. It is remembering. Yes, the soul tires on this journey. It tires because, in the desert, you lose everything that was excessive. Relationships that no longer resonated with your frequency. Ambitions that no longer had purpose. Characters that protected you but no longer fit. And each loss brings grief. Each loose layer demands a new perspective. Each night in the desert seems longer than it actually is. But it is precisely on these nights that you hear the truest sound of the soul, the sound of your thirst being recognized, honored, accepted, without judgment, without urgency, just with presence. So if you feel right now that everything is barren, colorless, meaningless, perhaps it's not the end of anything. Perhaps it's the middle of your greatest transformation. And in this middle, your role is not to run. It's not to flee. It's not to despair. It's to remain. It's to observe. It's to trust. Because in the silence of the desert, the soul learns to converse with the invisible, to orient itself by the sky, not by the ground, to drink from sources that no one sees. And when that water touches your true thirst, everything changes, not on the outside, but on the inside. If this image of the desert spoke to you, if somewhere in your soul you felt that you are truly traversing this sacred space, even if dry, even if harsh, write it here in the comments. My soul is digging its own well. Write if this phrase represents you. Write it down to name your process. Because only when we recognize where we are can we begin to glimpse where we truly want to go. What if for a moment you stopped fighting to feel better? What if for an instant you stopped trying to fix everything? What if instead of resisting what you feel, you just felt, without interference, without judgment, without that anxiety for immediate relief? Because maybe the problem isn't what you're feeling, but the constant struggle against what you feel. The internal war you wage every day trying to appear strong, trying to stay standing, trying to convince yourself that it's over, when everything inside you still screams for comfort. This resistance is more tiring than the pain itself. This attempt to be bigger than what you feel steals the strength you need precisely to get through it. The relief you so desperately seek isn't in escape. It's in silent surrender. And I don't mean surrender as giving up. It's not about surrendering to pain as if resigned to suffering. It's a conscious surrender, a spiritual surrender, A surrender that acknowledges, I'm not in control, and that's okay. A surrender that says, I don't need to solve everything right now. I just need to be present, because sometimes all that pain needs to begin to transform is to be accepted. You were taught to solve problems, to fix things, to overcome them, to find solutions, but you were almost never taught to stay with what bothers you, to observe what hurts you, to listen to what your soul whispers when no one else is around. And that's why you've become someone who, even with so much awareness, still feels guilty for being unwell, still believes you're failing every time you feel pain, still wants to run away from your own shadow whenever it approaches. But there is no cure where there is escape. What you resist persists, and what you avoid feeling returns with more force, more intensity, more insistence, because the soul doesn't give up on showing you what needs to be looked at. And perhaps that's why you're still tired, even after searching so much. Perhaps what's missing isn't more effort, more technique, more knowledge, but less resistance. Perhaps what's missing is simply a pause, not to escape the pain, but to sit beside it with humility and presence. Spiritual surrender is that sacred space where you suspend the desire for control, where you no longer try to force yourself to be okay, nor disguise what still pulsates. It's a space where you treat yourself with compassion, where you understand that being in process is not being lost, that feeling deeply is not weakness, that needing time is not regression. The soul has its own rhythm, and you only reconnect with it when you stop trying to impose yours. There is a form of peace that doesn't come from solutions but from permission. When you allow yourself to feel, something inside aligns. It's not that the pain disappears immediately, but it loses the weight of resistance. It ceases to be a monster you need to fight and becomes a part of you that is asking to be heard. And when you listen, when you open yourself honestly, that part begins to dissolve, not by force, but by presence. Because what heals most, deep down, is the silent love you offer yourself in moments when everything seems too dark. Rumi said, "Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you." And that's exactly it. Surrender is the door through which life enters. It's the channel through which the sacred begins to act, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. When you surrender, you align yourself with the flow of existence. You stop swimming against the current of your own soul. You begin to trust that even in chaos there is order, that even in pain there is meaning, that even in darkness there is direction. And if you look deep inside yourself now, perhaps you'll realize there's something within you that has always known this, an ancient silent wisdom that whispers, you don't need to fight so hard. And if you truly listen, perhaps you'll feel the urge to rest, to lower your weapons, to release the weight of seeming invincible, because nobody is. And there is no true spirituality where there is no humanity. The path of the soul is full of curves, yes, full of pauses, yes, full of tears you haven't yet understood. And that's okay. That's how it is. You are remembering. You are returning. You are shedding your virginity. Perhaps now, more than any technique, you just need this, to stop fighting with yourself, to let go of your body, to calm your mind, to breathe deeply, and to say, I accept what I am feeling, to say this sincerely, to say it as if looking in the mirror for the first time after a long time running away from yourself. And in that look, to realize that there is beauty even in pain, that there is light even in the shadow, that there is healing even in chaos when you stop running away from it. If you've made it this far, if you've allowed yourself to feel each word, if you've listened to your own soul while reading, write here in the comments, today I let go of the fight and choose to surrender. Write truthfully, write for yourself, because sometimes just taking that step changes everything. Sometimes it's the exact moment you let go that peace begins to touch what haste could never reach. You're not lost. You're just tired of being strong all the time. Tired of carrying the world on your shoulders without ever having a safe place to rest. Tired of seeming whole when inside you're in pieces. Tired of explaining yourself, justifying yourself, showing your worth, trying to be seen, heard, understood. Tired of wearing this armor that no longer matches who you've become. And the truth is, you've been strong for too long. Too strong. Strong enough to forget what it's like to be embraced. Strong enough to not even allow yourself the right to falter. But being strong all the time is inhuman. It's exhausting. It's lonely. And there comes a time when the soul says, enough. Not because it has given up on living, but because it no longer wants to live pretending. And perhaps that's exactly what you're feeling now. A deep weariness that doesn't come from life, but from the effort of sustaining it in a way that is no longer true. Because when the soul awakens, it no longer wants performance. It wants presence. It wants truth. It wants lightness. It wants rest. It wants to remember who it is without the masks that life forced you to wear. Rumi reveals, you were born with wings. Why do you prefer to crawl through life? And perhaps this is the question your soul has been trying to ask you for a long time. Why do you still drag yourself among people, situations, and thoughts that no longer sustain you? Why do you insist on fitting into a space where there is no longer room for who you have become? Why do you diminish yourself? Why do you still walk in fear when you were made to fly? The shift in consciousness begins here, in this moment of pause where you realize you're not lost, just exhausted from the way you've been living, exhausted from expectations that were never yours, exhausted from the demands you internalized, exhausted from the versions of yourself you built to survive, but which now suffocate you. And at this point, something changes, because you understand that you no longer need to continue in the same way. You understand that true strength is not about resisting. It's about recognizing. It's about transforming. It's about allowing yourself to change. There is no enlightenment without traversing darkness. There is no awakening without deconstruction. And so feeling tired, confused, vulnerable is a natural part of the process. You are in transition. You are ceasing to be what others expected of you to become who you truly are. And on this path, everything that is not essential begins to weigh you down. The empty words, the lukewarm relationships, the forced silences, the roles you played out of fear of not being loved. All of this now suffocates you because your soul no longer accepts anything less than truth. And this is where you begin to remember. Remember that you have wings. Remember that you are soul before you are function. Remember that you are light before you are pain. Remember that you are a path, not a destination. Remember that you don't need to follow where everyone else goes. That you can stop, change course, be silent, start over. That you can unlearn everything you've been taught if it means returning to yourself. That you can be vulnerable without being weak. That you can be sensitive and still have courage. Courage to live deeply in a world that prefers shallowness. This awareness doesn't arrive like thunder. It arrives like a whisper, a slight trembling inside, a discomfort that was once unease but is now direction. It's as if your soul begins to whisper truths you've ignored for so long. And once you listen, you can no longer pretend. You can no longer crawl, because you already know you have wings. You already know you were born for something greater than fitting in. You already know that this weariness has a name, repression of essence. The turning point happens when you start saying no, when you start prioritizing silence over obligation, pausing instead of rushing, authenticity over performance, when you start listening to yourself more than you listen to the world, when you start embracing yourself as you've never been embraced before, when you understand that you no longer need to prove anything, that you no longer need to adapt to old molds, that you no longer need to ignore your feelings to be accepted. And this transformation, though silent, is radical, because it doesn't just change what you do. It changes who you are while you do it. It changes your gaze, your gestures, your energy. It changes your vibration, and everything around you begins to change too. People leave, others arrive, situations collapse, new doors open. But most importantly, you begin to feel at home within yourself. Even when everything outside still seems uncertain, your soul knows. Now you are on the right path, because you are being honest. You are being yourself. This moment is sacred, because it marks the end of a way of existing that kept you small, and the beginning of a flight that perhaps you postponed for too long. Not for lack of ability, but for fear of being who you truly are. But now something inside you moves differently, and you realize that you are not lost, you never were. You were just preparing to remember. If this resonated with you, if at any point you felt that this text reflected what you were feeling without being able to name it, write it in the comments below. Now I remember my wings. Write this sentence as if you were making a pact with yourself, as if you were taking responsibility for flying, even if slowly, even if with fear, but always with truth. If you've stayed with me this far, it's because something within you recognized the silent truth that echoes in every word. This is no coincidence. Your soul is asking for more depth, more listening, more truth. And here you find that space. A space where pain is not denied, where silence is respected, where the weariness of the soul is welcomed with reverence. So if you feel that your pain is also a calling, subscribe to the channel now, not just to receive videos, but to walk side by side on this journey that never ends. It only changes form. Here, each video is a mirror, each word is an invitation to healing, and each pause is a new beginning. And if this content resonated with you, leave a like. This shows that this kind of truth needs to exist, needs to continue being told. Your gesture helps other souls find this message, and perhaps themselves. Now it doesn't stop here. Watch the next video that is appearing on the screen. He is the natural continuation of this journey, because the soul, when it begins to awaken, no longer wants to go back to sleep, and you have already begun to remember. Let's go together.